number of the concerns that have been raised by my colleagues here in reference to the new authorities to be given to the Fed. But although since that's been gone over a lot, I want to, in my short time, focus on an issue that I don't think has had much attention here yet today, and that is the bifurcation of consumer protection from safety and soundness regulation. It seems to me that we can get the most effective consumer protection by not bifurcating those two functions and moving forward in a way that allows those who are really connected with the regulatory system of our banks to have the ability to implement statutory and regulatory policy on consumer protection. And what I'd like to do is to read you a statement by the Comptroller of the Currency, John Dugan, when he testified before our committee in March, because he made the same points and made a number of points about why that is the case, and I'd like you to respond to his points. He says the best way to implement consumer protection regulation of banks, the best way to protect consumers, is to do so through the prudential supervision. He gives these following reasons. First, prudential supervisors' continual presence in the banks through the examination process put them in the very best position to ensure compliance with consumer protection requirements established by statute and regulation. Second, prudential supervisors have strong enforcement powers and exceptional leverage over bank management to achieve corrective action. And third, the examiners are continually exposed to practical effects of implementing consumer protection rules for bank customers. The Prudential Supervisory Agency is in the best position to formulate and refine consumer protection regulations for the bank. Could you respond to those points?
Those are thoughtful concerns, and they've been made by supervisors of the United States for a long period of time. And we've had some experience with that model, and it didn't work well enough. So our basic judgment is we need to change the model, and separating that responsibility from the core safety and soundness responsibility of bank supervisors is a better way to get a better balance on both those functions. But you're right, and that's a good version of those concerns that you quote from John Dugan, and I think those are good arguments, but I would just say we've had a good experiment in whether that model works, and it didn't work well enough.
So you're saying that we had adequate consumer protection statutory and regulatory authority, but that it was not exercised?
No, I would say that there were limitations both in the strength of the rules that were established and how those were enforced. The rules themselves were probably, I think almost certainly not sufficiently strong, and it's certain that they were not enforced with sufficient rigor and evenness across the range of institutions that are allowed to generate those products.
How do you respond to the concern, though, that one of the needs we have to focus on, at least in my opinion, and I think this is a pretty broadly held belief, is to streamline and make more efficient our regulatory system? Before we got into this crisis last October, most of the focus on regulatory reform was on how to stop our slide in competitiveness with regard to our foreign capital markets or the world capital markets. And one of the concerns there was that we continue to have this increase in numbers of regulators to the point where we have double-digit regulators for any financial function. And here we're seeing a proposal once again to increase the number of regulatory agencies that will now be managing our financial economy.
Well, on balance, we're not increasing the number of agencies. We are reducing the one important source of arbitrage and inefficiency, which is between a national bank and a national thrift charter. But you're right, we are proposing to separate the consumer function from the existing safety and soundness function and the other authorities that have that and put it in one place with accountability for the reasons I said, which is the current model. We had a long record in it, and it did fail in important respects. I believe that this basic concern about competitiveness of our system remains a very important concern that has to guide everything we do. But I do believe our system will be stronger, more effective, more competitive, greater confidence, enjoy greater confidence around the world if we have better safeguards and protections, not just around disclosure, which is very important, where I think we still lead the world, but in terms of basic protections against stability. Our system will not be competitive. Our institutions will not be competitive if we have a system in the future that's been as vulnerable as ours had to periodic crises like this every 2 to 3 to 4 years. Now, this is the first crisis we've had in a long time of this severity, but we've had a record of the last 3 decades where every 3 to 5 years we've had a shock of significant magnitude, and I think that does not make our system or our institutions competitive. And a better foundation of stability would be supportive of trying to make sure that our system remains, in many ways, the envy of the world in doing this core job of taking the savings of Americans' investors and channeling them to where they can be best used in support of innovation, new ideas, growing companies.
Thank you. My time's up. I'd like to pursue this further with you, though.
Senator Bai.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'd like to start off with a comment and then two questions.